Obviously, we put in a lot of effort on both sides, but just hasn't worked the way we wanted. So the team's decided to make a change for next year. And so we had a lot of discussions, but in the end, we mutually agreed that it was the right thing for both of us. I will continue to do the rest of this year, absolutely, and I'll continue to give it my all.
When it comes to Daniel Ricciardo, it's still very uncertain as to where he'll end up in 2023. There are a couple of options available to him, and although nobody expected that the 8-time race winner will end up in a situation like this, the reality is what it is, and Ricciardo will have to satisfy with one of the seats in Haas, Williams, or the reserve driver role in another team. But the starting role in Haas and Williams isn't a guaranteed thing either, as both of these teams are looking in another direction too, and that's something that Ricciardo spoke about during the press conference prior to the Singapore GP. He provided further insight as to what's next for him from 2023 and beyond, and if you want to find out more, stick around with us until the end of this video. Now, Daniel Ricciardo has decided to end things with McLaren at the end of this season, as his 19 points with just a couple of races remaining in the races aren't cutting him a deal for the 2023 season and beyond. Although he was willing to work it out with the team, and the initial statements from McLaren affirmed the same, it seems like McLaren decided to go in another direction when it comes to their starting drivers lineup. That's why they signed Piastri, leaving Ricciardo out there on the dry, as Ricciardo did have a contract for the 2023 season with McLaren. Nevertheless, once the buyout agreements were affirmed by both sides, we all thought that Ricciardo would race in Alpine. After all, it would have been a perfect comeback story, as the Aussie finished twice on the podium in 2020 for the team, an achievement that hasn't been done in years for Renault. He also finished P5 in the Constructors' Championship, which was an impressive feature too. Still, it seems like Alpine aren't willing to commit to Ricciardo in the long term, as they're looking to sign Gasly from AlphaTauri. Well, that leaves Ricciardo with a couple of more options, such as Haas or Williams, when it comes to the starting seat for the 2023 season. But Steiner spoke about Ricciardo and his commitment to the American team, as Steiner contacted Ricciardo earlier this season in order to lobby for the Aussie to join Haas. The team is likely to part ways with Schumacher, who just hasn't been able to satisfy the needs of the team and is likely on the move after the 2022 season. When talking about Ricciardo, Steiner said that if the Aussie was interested in joining the team, he would have given them a call, adding, "In his situation, Daniel first has to decide for himself what he does. It makes a little sense to persuade him to do something. He has to decide for himself. If he feels like it, he'll certainly call. Otherwise, he'll probably say, I'll do a sabbatical or something else." Now, Ricciardo said on multiple occasions that his future is indeed in F1, and he doesn't see it anywhere else. But now that multiple teams have started to give up on him as the number one choice for the driving seat, it seems like he'll settle with a reserve role at a top team. According to him, this will be the most realistic option for his future, as he delivered some updates regarding his future on Thursday, adding, "Of course plan A would be on the grid, but nothing's changed. Let's say I don't want to just jump at the first seat available. I know the landscape probably changes as well at the end of the next year with contracts and whatever, so I don't want to say remaining patient, but just remaining open. My management team is talking with, I want to say pretty much everyone, or they're having conversations. So we're just trying to put it all together and figure out what makes the most sense. I also don't want to just look at the next 12 months and not look at the next 24, said Ricciardo, who also spoke about the reserve role and having a seat towards the back of the grid. A reserve role is something that's realistic, yeah, that's the two I would say realistic options. It's not to be anywhere else. I love other disciplines of motorsport, but I don't see myself there. At least I feel as though I jump into something like that and then it closes the door in F1. It kind of feels like I checked out, and I haven't, so I'm solely focused on F1, and we'll see. It's evident that Ricciardo's future is still hanging in the air, but by these statements, Ricciardo isn't throwing away the possibility of driving in a team that is currently at the back of the grid, such as Haas or Williams, although the latter one is considering signing a rookie like Sargent if the USA driver can be eligible for the super license at the end of the season, or De Vries, who had an amazing debut race with a team in Monza. Ricciardo is still a viable option for them. The question is whether Ricciardo will accept the huge cut in the paychecks, something that he hasn't been used to so far in his racing days. When asked about joining a team on the back of the grid and whether that would do him some good to his career, Ricciardo said, I mean, it's possible. There are all things I'm weighing up. What fighting at the front does, when you've had that taste as well, it's real, you know, and that's ultimately where I want to be. So I guess I don't want to just go from race to race. I want to race with a true belief and understanding that I can be back on the podium, ultimately. But next year, if I'm not to be racing in F1, then I feel like there could be a blessing in all that. I mean, it could make me freaking start foaming at the mouth, wanting to get back. So that's why I'm pumped up to be on the grid again, but I'm also seeing positives if that's not the case. So that's why I'm at peace with whatever's going to happen in 23, because I feel like everything is going to happen for a reason and all these things will make sense. Having a few weeks off was good to get some headspace, clarity, all those things, finished Ricciardo. According to his former team boss Christian Horner, it's very uncertain as to why Alpine doesn't consider Ricciardo as the first choice for their team. This will ultimately mean that the team will receive a driver that knows how to drive the car and a driver that will be ready to redeem himself after 2 very bad seasons in McLaren. When talking about his former employee, Horner said, "I think I would probably go with Ricciardo, to be honest with you. They obviously know him from a couple of seasons ago and he was very together during his last season there, scoring podiums, and I think he's the type of guy that I think you could rebuild him. It's obviously not been a great experience for him at McLaren for whatever reason, but you just have to think back to some of the drives that he did for us, some of the wins he had, the podiums, some of the stunning overtakes he was capable of. That's still there, I'm sure. He just needs a bit of a reset. You don't just forget how to deliver, so I hope for him he gets another opportunity and gets himself back on the grid for next year," finished Horner. But according to a former F1 champion, Jacques Villeneuve, he doesn't see a problem in Ricciardo not being considered as the main option for Alpine, as he added, "Why would he be? He had 2 terrible years at Renault and 2 even more terrible years at McLaren. That's 4 years. Almost half of his Formula 1 career was bad. Alpine have no reason to take him, especially when he's driven there before. The modern cars just don't seem to suit his driving style. Look, he was impressive at Red Bull. He showed amazing overtaking maneuvers. He was ahead of Max at the beginning, but in the end Max started to get a handle on him. Then he switched, and after the switch something seems to have happened that he never managed to get a handle on. He never recovered from that," finished Jacques. Jacques also spoke about Ricciardo taking a sabbatical and going 1 year outside of F1, saying that would do him more harm than good. He elaborated that that's something champions do, like Alonso or Schumacher, and if Ricciardo opted for this, it would likely make him lazy and would hurt his chances of a future in F1 from 2024 and beyond. Now, it's worth mentioning that even Ricciardo himself is considering a place in a lower tier team. And now that we see the new regulations have indeed brought racing closer, Ricciardo could redeem his old glory in teams like Haas or Williams. Of course, he'll likely be far away from podium fights like he was with Renault or Red Bull, but he'll be much better compared to what he does now in McLaren. So, what do you think is next for Ricciardo? Do you think that the Aussie still has a chance to race in F1? Let us know in the comments below.